A very good evening to you and welcome to this week's first edition of the Watchdog. My name is Vuyo Mvogo, and on the show tonight, is there going to be stability at last at Nelson Mandela Bay? We speak to the Eastern Cape Cocta MEC, Zolile Williams, who has changed the type of municipal system that is in effect in that city.
This letter was simply sent out into the public domain by that kangaroo call that called themselves the National Disciplinary Committee.
Expulsions, court cases, and the disqualification of some members as the ANC builds up to its 55th National Conference, which starts later this week. My panelists for this evening are Professors Susan Boyson and Lesiba Tefu to unpack some of the events of the past few days. We also speak to Buddha Tsotetsi, who is part of the group of ANC members that are calling for transparency in the party's NEC nominations list process. Will be joining us in a short while. The Watchdog starts now. Nelson Mandela Bay Municipality will now be run through a collective executive system combined with a ward participatory system. Changing from the current mayoral executive system, that yielded very little fruit for the people of the Bay as council struggles to make decisions and get their ducks in a row. Joining me now is Cocta Eastern Cape's MEC, and that is Mr. Zolile Williams. Mr. Williams, good evening. Thanks very much for your time. I think the real surprise is that it has taken so long to get to this point.
Good evening, Vuyo, and good evening to the viewers of the Watchdog. Yes, Vuyo, it has taken some time, and we agree that the process had to be followed to the latter, and we couldn't act as if there are no submissions made in respect of the people's views about the type of municipality they want there. So we had to consider those and then ultimately make a determination having made those considerations.
What sort of inputs did you get, especially from the opposition? From the Democratic Alliance that is currently has its member or its councillor as the executive mayor.
Well, Vuyo, out of 33 submissions, 23 were from various organizations around Nelson Mandela, and only 8 were from minority parties and other bigger parties, as you mentioned, the Democratic Alliance. And their view was that the nature of the municipality must not be changed, it must remain as it is, and political parties will just mature on their own and begin to attend to their responsibilities and tasks in that particular council. But that has not happened, and we have witnessed chaotic council meetings, inability of the coalition to manage smaller parties, and we believe as the Eastern Cape Provincial Government that with this type of municipality that we're bringing about, we would want to ensure that service delivery is brought about to the people of Nelson Mandela, and secondly, that there is political stability. And the major problem I am having current, Vuyo, is that the people of Nelson Mandela will be losing about 242 million of infrastructure grant because of the inability of the municipality to spend that money. That reverses, the challenges that the people of Nelson Mandela face, and therefore stability is what we would want to see as the Eastern Provincial Government.
Of course, I mean, you would have seen, in fact, the Democratic Alliance did say this, that they are going to oppose this. And my understanding is that there may well be a court challenge coming your way.
Well, Vuyo, we will expect parties to bring about those court challenges. However, no one can stand in front of the people of Nelson Mandela and tell them that with this system, 242 million is getting lost, councils are not sitting, and there's no focus to the people. And the lessons we're learning out of these legislated coalitions is that there is lack of maturity of political parties to work together for public good, which is a challenge in our system in South Africa. And I think having a framework to manage coalitions in the future is the route to go.
Well, I mean, the DA is alleging that you're only doing this because they are in charge. When this had to be done while the ANC had a mayor there, you couldn't do it. Your government, the provincial government, couldn't do it. But you are quick to move now because it is not the ANC that is in power.
Vuyo, I would like to really dismiss that completely because we initiated the Section 12 amendment when the ANC was in leadership of that coalition because of our view that these coalitions were not working and they were compromising service delivery to the people of Nelson Mandela. We started the process. We initiated it during the time when the mayor was ANC mayor there. And we just have to conclude the process now that the DA was in power. But nobody can stand in front of the people and say these coalitions are united and they are focusing on service delivery. Ever since this new coalition was established, there's been fights and misunderstanding in council meetings. And I don't think the people of Nelson Mandela would want that. In fact, they have expressed their opinions by saying to me through their submissions that MEC and the provincial government, please fast track the implementation of the amendment of the type of municipality because we want services. And we responded to that call.
And from where you sit, you are confident that you've done everything by the book. You've ticked all the necessary boxes.
Exactly, Vuyo. What is going to unfold now is that in 14 days, we will call the IEC and inform the Nelson Mandela Council that the type of municipality has changed, and then all the structures, all the political office bearers have to be re-elected, and all the parties that are in majority will then be represented, starting from the mayor, the speaker, the executive committee, and all the other committees of council. And this system, we believe, represents the views of the public because the majority of people voted for certain political parties, although they could not achieve outright majority. But this Section 12 amendment system recognizes the proportionality of the voters in voting for their parties in Nelson Mandela.
Mr. Williams, let me thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you very much.
Zulele Williams is the MEC for local government in the Eastern Cape. He has written to the municipality telling them that There will no more be an executive mayor in Nelson Mandela Bay. There will now be an executive comprising of the leading parties in that municipality. Of course, we did try to get the mayor to get his response. He couldn't come on the program this evening. We'll keep trying. But previously, he has made his intention known that he will challenge this decision. We'll see how this one pans out. Of course, there have been instability in that municipality for years now. These coalition arrangements really not working, and the people of that part of our country, of course, being the ones that suffer. To ANC matters now. Niehaus has vowed to fight his expulsion by the National Disciplinary Committee of the ANC. Last year, the former Mkhonto military veteran spokesperson was suspended due to statements that he made in Gandla, where he went to support former President Jacob Zuma before his arrest. Meanwhile, some ANC members under the banner of the Kgalema disputed NEC list are taking the party to court to compel the ANC to provide them with raw data of all branch nominations for the NEC additionals. They want their matter to be heard on Wednesday. The ANC Electoral Committee has filed papers to oppose the application.
Niehaus making his intentions clear. He's vowed to fight the outcomes of the National Disciplinary Committee tooth and nail. Last year, he was charged with 6 counts of misconduct for contravening Rule 25 of the ANC Constitution.
I want you to hear this, members of the National Disciplinary Committee. I want you to hear this, members of the National Executive Committee, the outgoing National Executive Committee of the ANC. And I want you, especially you, Cyril Ramaphosa, to hear this. No one can expel me from the ANC.
Meanwhile, as the 55th conference of the ANC looms closer, the party's electoral committee is preparing for a showdown in court over objections to the NEC list that was announced by the electoral committee.
We don't have any interest to delay the conference. For that matter, we want that conference to be successful. What we are doing is to entrench a democratic culture within the ANC, to say that the ANC can flout its rules and expect that it will be able to be credible for it to say they are a democratic organization and they can lead the country without any questions. So what we are doing is to enhance the credibility and of the outcomes of conference.
Lawyers representing the electoral committee say the unhappy ANC members should withdraw their application. The electoral committee says the members need to understand the rules of the party.
We can't not allow them to court if they want to go to court, but they should talk to us more. The gap is that they ask for the list. We tell them we're still working on the list because we're doing the vetting and processing the deadlines and the acceptances. Now, whilst we are doing that, we furnish them with with the list as they are. Then they don't come back to us and say, we are not satisfied with the list because of the following reasons. They simply appeal to the NEC and state the same reasons of 8.5. And as I'm saying, with 8.5, we have complied. We have a list, we have seen the list. We went to the media and had 2 media conferences announcing lists. That is executing Rule 8.5, which they cite. You see, and that's why we're saying they're citing out of context. And what confuses most comrades in terms of these processes is that they are governed by the ANC Constitution. So in terms of that Constitution, for you to be able to be in the top 240 that we now talk about, you ought to be nominated by a province. In the case of additionals, to be nominated by a province, you ought to be amongst the top 80 nominees in a province.
The ANC's renewal agenda has pit party leaders against one another as contradictions have been sharpened, proving that the renewal of the organization is not an easy task. Natasha Piri, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Well, joining us now is the ANC's Buddha Tsotetsi, who is part of the group of ANC members who are taking the party to court. So, Tsotetsi, good evening. Thanks very much for your time. Well, your comrades seem to think that you are misreading the Constitution, and that's where the confusion is coming from. They are implementing what is in your books.
Thank you so much, Vuyo, for having me tonight with you, and let me greet all the viewers of Watchdog and the viewers of SABC as a whole. Vuyo, there's no misunderstanding here between us and fellow comrades, in this case, Mr. Machila. What we are asking for as people who have lodged an objection to the ANC Electoral Commission, and that has expressed our concerns and a discomfort with the reply of Mr. Machila to the leadership of the ANC, the NEC, is nothing but asking for the raw data of the nomination process that took place since the inception of the process, when the ANC engaged in its BGMs, which were tasked to nominate the National Executive Committee of the ANC, for which, after we have sent the correspondence to Mr. Machila, he further said to us he was going to respond to our demand in due course, and he gave us some ridiculous list of 340-something that he has claimed to be the raw data. And we said, this is not enough. Can we talk and engage about this? Mr. Machila has been dismissing. Mr. Machila has been so arrogant. He has not been prepared to meet with us. In fact, in one of his interviews, he says we are welcome to go to court, meaning that we can go to hell in his view. So there's no misunderstanding here. What we're asking for is that the ANC, through its Electoral Commission, should provide the raw data of the information of nominations of the ANC thus far. And because of we have, with due respect to subjecting ourselves in the internal process of the ANC, we came to a conclusion where we were left with no option but to consider the legal avenues. That's the reason we have filed the papers to the Court of Law, seeking the Court of Law to order the ANC to release the raw data with a deadline of Friday, 10 o'clock. Failure for them to do so, we also asking the court to order the ANC to put before their attention in the national conference coming over the weekend that matter to be at the agenda of the national conference. So there is no misunderstanding. What we are doing, we are just exercising our constitutional rights as members of the ANC and as citizens of South Africa to say, give us the raw data just in the vein of transparency and accountability.
What are your suspicions, though? What do you believe may have happened?
Our belief,
clearly, you're suspecting foul play.
Yes, that's what we suspect for now, and the decency is with the ANC to actually prove us wrong, because we had observed the processes until the ANC itself. Remember, historically in the ANC, processes of nominations, elections are closed processes. That's why even in the conference itself, during the electoral processes, the media houses and so on will be taken out of the conference because it's a closed session. But the ANC itself, through the Electoral Commission, went out, convening the press conference and published what they called a final list of top 200. And as they were mentioning the top 200, which Comrade Kgalema said is the final list, they've also indicated that they've also considered gender parity, 50-50. And that's when we started to be suspicious, to say, look, this is something that is abnormally. Usually the gender parity get to be considered after the voting has commenced in the conference during the composition of the National Executive Committee. Now that they mention it, it means they've interfered with the processes of nominations. Because of nominations, you allow everybody to compete according to the one who has received the highest numbers according to democracy. And in this case, Comrade Kgalema said, we have made the final list of 200 according to gender parity and the ones that have received the highest votes. It's only when we have asked the ANC to release the raw data, because we became suspicious that there could have been manipulation, there could have been corruption that took place, there could have been favors of...
To what end, though? Who would be trying to do what, to achieve what?
The Electoral Committee itself, if you remember with the previous local government processes of the ANC, there have been allegations of people who are imposed by those who decide who must come in, who must not come in, against the will of the branches themselves, against the will of the communities. And Comrade Khalim and his Electoral Commission came to a conclusion to say communities and most of branches of the ANC have a case that need to be attended to. Yet they came to a conclusion to say post-local government elections, they will come back to those communities and branches where they will have to reverse processes which could have not been fair, processes which could have not been accurate with regard to the guidelines and the rules of the ANC. So we know that this kind of shenanigans happens in the ANC, and that's why the ANC itself came to a conclusion that everybody should subject himself to the process of renewal. The process of renewal is intended on cleansing the ANC internally, cleansing the ANC as an organization, cleaning the image of the ANC away from the image that has been projected out there by to the communities that the ANC is this corrupt organization full of patronage, wherein dominant factions can actually exploit their power and access to the leadership authorities to decide the leadership outcomes of the organization against the will of the branches. So we believe strong that for us to actually promote principles of democracy, that of transparency and accountability and so on, the ANC must come clean. And we're simply asking for the ANC to release a raw data because of Comrade Khalim Amutlante himself went out and said almost 8,000 or so of nominees which were nominated in this process. So indeed, they've got that raw data. What is so difficult for the ANC to release raw data to the public is the ANC that went public and released the top 200 so-called final list of the nominees. And upon our objection, remember, they said they will come back to us with the list because they were still trying to clean their house to put it in order. And in fact, what they did, they told us that only then they were going to conduct screening and vetting. That's so ridiculous because according to the very same guidelines and the rules, screening and vetting, in as much as checking with the members who have been nominated whether or not they accept the nomination or decline. It's a process that was supposed to commence before they published the top 200. Only when you objected, they started to conduct the vetting. And that on its own shows incredibility from the part of the process itself. So we believe that there could have been suspicions of manipulations, exchanges of monies because of some of our members who have signed the pledge, who have pledged, the petition that is there, which has been signed by more than 200 members. They raise those kind of issues to say there are people who are handpicked and so on. So it's up to the ANC itself to come clean publicly and say, here is a raw data of at least 8,000 members of nominees which were nominated in this process.
Which faction are you suspecting them of working for, or in whose interests you think the committee?
I'm not inclined about who belongs to which faction, but what I know is that the ANC has a political challenge of factionalism, has a political challenge of trying to deal with divisive elements, groupings, and corrupt individuals within the ANC in its agenda to unite the ANC. Hence, the ANC is engaged in a renewal program. So I wouldn't, for now, accuse anybody to belonging to any faction. But this kind of shenanigans, this kind of ill discipline, this kind of behavior and attitude that has been displayed by Machila himself, it proves one of the tendencies that actually are the core recipe of factionalism in the ANC. So I wouldn't say who belongs to which faction. In as far as we are concerned, as people who have filed the documents, we are not aligned to any faction. We are not pro any campaign. We are actually engaged in the program to challenge the ANC to stick to its democratic principles of transparency, accountability. That's all.
Your view of on the expulsion of Karl Niehaus?
It's unfortunate that during this time when the ANC is left a few days to actually engage in its national conference where it must talk about matters of policy and bringing back the credibility of the ANC and restoring the image of the ANC and focusing more of our times and energy in bringing out programs that will talk to the emancipation of our people out there. And the ANC will be dealing with issues of discipline in relation to Comrade Niehaus. So I may not know for now what could have been the verdict of the DC in relation to the expulsion of Comrade Niehaus, but you are welcome to interview Comrade Niehaus or the ANC itself on that matter. For us, what we stand for is the release of the raw data, and for the court to order the ANC that this matter must be discussed in the National Conference of the ANC for the purpose of transparency and accountability.
Okay, you have, of course, seeing that the ANC is, of course, going to oppose, the application. They have appointed Chris Naidu attorneys to deal with this matter. Buddha Tsotetsi, thanks very much for coming through.
Thank you so much, Vio.
He's, of course, part of the group that is taking the ANC to court. Time to take a quick ad break. We continue unpacking some of the issues surfacing as the ANC prepares for its upcoming conference this weekend. Expulsions, court cases, and the disqualification of some members as the ANC builds up to its 55th National Conference, which starts later this week. And to weigh in on some of the issues currently plaguing the ruling party, I'm joined by political analysts, Professors Lesiba Defu and Susan Boyson. Good evening to both of you. Thanks very much for your time.
Good afternoon. Good evening.
Well, it's been getting interesting over the past few days. Has it not been, Professor Boyson?
Yes, indeed, Will. Just when a week or two ago, it seemed like just about everything is fine and the results are ready to be announced after the initial nominations. Then this spate of court cases and legal action started. And in so many ways, actually, it is not surprising. Ever since Polokwane, we've become kind of used to the fact that there are so many forms of contestation through litigation, exclusions, disqualifications, and even charges against presidents, as in the case of Polokwane in 2007. And then there was Mango in 2012, was, for example, the Free State delegation disqualified. And then come the last time, just on the eve of Nasrec, where there were disqualifications of delegations from some branches, from the Northwest, for example, and provincial executive committees. So it's become quite a standard feature. And this time around, no disappointment on that front. There are always new variations, and the one of the list itself being disputed, that's quite a new one, and it could potentially be quite serious.
Well, it's going to be, interesting, Professor Defu, to see how tomorrow goes. We've seen the opposition challenging ANC MPs to say, look, put your votes where your mouths are. If you're unhappy with Cyril Ramaphosa, show that tomorrow when Parliament, of course, debates the whole situation around President Cyril Ramaphosa.
Thanks, Rio. And Susan in the dark. That's fine. Look, what Susan was saying prompted me to say, by the by, we have been here many a times, right? And Einstein said, it's a sign of the weakness of the mind when you keep repeating the same formula over and over again, expecting different results. But I leave that to the electorate. Your question, Vio, what do I expect tomorrow? I don't expect much. I can even, before I proceed, say Ramaphosa will prevail. Tomorrow is a non-starter for me. For the benefit of those who don't understand the process that much, right? The determination should be made tomorrow. whether they want to proceed with the impeachment process or not. And then if there is an agreement to that effect, then a committee must set up to determine definitively if indeed he violated his oath of office or not. And if that determination is made, then that would matter, because they will have to vote. And when they vote, either he will be out or he will remain. But I dare say, even when they reach that stage, he would still prevail. The numbers are on his side.
Also, it'd be interesting, Professor Boyson. I mean, I was reading yesterday, I think it was in the Sunday Times, when Dr. Zweli Mkhize is calling upon ANC members also to do the right thing, saying, you know, they are there to represent people. In other words, he was actually saying they should go against Luthuli House instructions.
Yes, those were very interesting statements for you. And indeed, it's going to be a double test, so multiple test for the ANC tomorrow. On the one hand, there is central party discipline. And we know traditionally when the ANC is under attack from opposition parties, they unite ranks. And even in the case of former President Jacob Zuma, when the pressure was really on and there was very strong allegations against him, they still united ranks, but there were a number of dissenters. And we also know from Constitutional Court's judgment subsequently that MPs were really told in no uncertain terms, as in the Zondo Commission report, they have to hold the executive to account. And so it is, in many ways, it is another case of deja vu. Who are the MPs accountable to? The party and the discipline, or the individual consciences and individual cases where they may actually just have factional interest. And if they vote against Ramaphosa for the institution of the impeachment committee, it doesn't mean they're not holding their representatives to account. It could just be that they actually support another faction, have other designs in ANC's election processes. So it's going to be very, very difficult to determine exactly who is being held to account here. But I think, and here I agree with Lisiba, that then it is going to be a case of the numbers probably being on Ramaphosa's side, especially also because he has taken it on legal review, judicial review, and there is a chance, and many MPs see it in that way, besides these other political agendas, there is a chance that he could be not guilty as charged. And I think in those kind of situations, that those uncertainties are going to prevail. And Ramaphosa is going to see another day without an impeachment committee pending, at least for now, winning time and playing for time. And getting to the next bottom line again, that as in the case when Sir Ramaphosa suggested, hinted, whatever the case was, a week or so ago, that he may be resigning, and then that was reverted. It could, again in future, come to a similar scenario where the ANC chooses rather to take this certainty and the certainty of broader political stability, which they think will be absent if Ramaphosa goes. And that could be a continuous drawing card or one-upmanship for him to continue in his position.
In fact, Professor Telfam, it was interesting that, Cyril Ramaphosa's main rival, Dr. Mkhize, was in fact evoking the fact that, as Prof was saying, in the past, the courts actually lambasted the legislators for, not doing their jobs by holding the executive to account.
I can hear somebody out there in the countryside say, but who's speaking, by the way? Who's speaking? Isn't this the man who was in the top 6 that never allowed the people to at least act or vote as per their conscience? He was in that top 6. And he's now telling me that the people must not act according to their own conscience, right? I mean, they must act according to their own conscience. But yesterday, he held a different position. I think he was talking about the bullying at the conference last week and so forth. But may I just remind him and others, those who are listening, that whether in your own faith, act according to that maxim, that you will at the same time wish to become it a universal law. Whether in your own favor or that of another, never use the other as a means, but always as an end. It is important. That's a basic moral principle that if you internalize that, then I'm sure you'll go some distance. And then if you take the seminal document of the ANC called Through the Eye of the Needle, then you have carried the day. So Mkhize must spare us all those things, because he is part of what I call the tyranny of the party. The tyranny of the party, whereby you succumbed the right to think you are for yourself and others think of yourself, and you oblige simply because you want to belong. And that conformism has never been part of my desire. Hence, I do not belong, but I just remain a patriot. And I'll go with anybody whose interest and primary concern is to protect, to preserve, and to promote the national flag and the national constitution of the Republic.
Professor Poisson, I mean, it was interesting that at the weekend, Dr. Mkhize repeated something he told me a couple of weeks ago when we had an interview, where he said he's confident he's got the numbers. What we're seeing in public are people just posturing. It's not, it's not what we've seen so far is not how the ANC membership is going to vote come this weekend. Alleging as well that other people, I mean, money is playing a big role. And I remember his running mate, Phumulo Masualle, in that same interview saying, well, we've told our supporters to take the money, but do the right thing, vote for us.
Yes, indeed. There are so many possibilities still. Now, on the one hand, there seems to be so much certainty in the preliminary rounds of nominations and Cyril Ramaphosa in that round. But we know in that round, Cyril Ramaphosa had just over 2,000 branch nominations, and over 4,000 delegates will eventually vote at this conference. We also know that there is so much horse trading and provincial reconstruction of the cross slates of the president and Zweli Mkhize. And so many uncertainties still remain there. We do know that both teams have their campaigners out on the ground across the country, really rolling over hills and valleys, as I say, to ensure on the one hand that the nominations they do have are consolidated, and on the other hand, try to win over more to ensure that majority out of perhaps around even 4,200 voting delegates. So nothing is cast in stone. Even 8 out of 9 provincial majorities so far for Cyril Ramaphosa on that preliminary round, that could go up in smoke if the campaigners on the ground are really successful. But it's really going head to head on the ground, and as people start making their way to Nasrec. So there are many possibilities of uncertainty, although the preliminary figures seem pretty persuasive. And other times when the outcome, like in Polokwane, like in Nasrec 5 years ago, when it was very close, there were definite indications beforehand that it was going to be close. So things can be changing on the ground, but we still have to see the evidence of that.
Professor Tefo, I mean, the fact that Cyril Ramaphosa has prevailed, I mean, if the last 2 NEC and NWC meetings are anything to go by, does it necessarily mean that he's got it in the bag?
I did say in the course of the week of last week that if you were to do a snap survey, you might be surprised that numerically he has appreciated, Ramaphosa has appreciated in value. It is more about the why than the what. Who are they who are calling for his demise? Who are they who are paying for his blood? Indirectly and inadvertently, they have assisted the electoral process in his favor. Because it is the why that is fundamental, especially when others begin to put it at the heart of it all. Oh, he's going against you. By the way, the man of digital vibes, apparently, it is an issue because he put his fingers in the public purse. But this one is said that money was stolen from him, money sold from his own cattle. It's not an easy one to convince. As an intellectual, I can understand. I can nuance the debate to a point where I say, yes, he's wrong. Yes, I agree. Especially when it comes to holding so much money, especially Forex, on your own person. On that one, I doubt he won't wiggle his way out. But for the average Joe out there, it's not going to be easy. But Vuyo, what is more interesting to me, and maybe concerning to me, is that why would we have men and women with so much hanging over their heads that would have disqualified them in normal societies, that we still believe that they can lead us? Who are they who are putting these names forward, despite so much is being said about them? So many things being said is because at the heart of it, we have allowed the electoral system as is to continue, even when we knew it was wrong and it was not appropriate, it was unconstitutional and invalid. We keep remaining beholden to one party. And we keep talking as if there are no 60 million people in the country from which we can draw the leadership that can take this country forward. Yes, I can repeat myself, the ANC is endowed with immense talent, but those who could take us forward have been shunted, renounced, denounced. And indeed, if invited back, they could make a difference. But Ramaphosa, Mkhize, with all these things around and about them, under normal circumstances, they ought not to be on the ballot box.
Professor Boyson, Dr. Mkhize acknowledges, certainly from the last conversation we had, that he's going to need the support of the other candidate who are not as strong as him to be able to successfully challenge the incumbent. But very little is known about the actual support that people like Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma and Lindiwe Sisulu have.
Yes, indeed. It would be a very uncertain alliance to bring that in, because these are two politicians that do not come with a conventional kind of constituencies that the bigger figures, the more popularly endorsed leaders in ANC have been bringing into the equation. And they, both Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma and Lindiwe Sisulu, come with reputations of being this, I almost say sidekicks, but really seconds nominated running mates of presidents. Even in the last round, 2017, Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma stood in own right, but she never developed her own character in that and an own popular base in that. She carried forth what her former husband, Jacob Zuma, had put into that contest. So these are women leaders, and we're ones really wanting to endorse and look for strong women leaders. They do not come with that kind of ticket, on that kind of ticket into this race. And that then also means that they don't bring that broader popularity either within the organization. If they had that broader popularity within the organization, they would have notched up more of the nomination, branch nomination votes, or a broader, beyond the ANC, popular kind of a mandate that Cyril Ramaphosa is very good at bringing into the race. If he's fighting this race both internally in the ANC, with the ANC broader membership, and with broader public perceptions out there. And that combination makes him a very strong candidate. And these potential alliance partners then in form of also nominated presidential candidates of the ANC in these two persons, they really do not bring that to this Zweli Mkhize campaign. They can perhaps add a few branch nominations, even a good few hundred, I would say, but I doubt if it would go beyond that. So they themselves are no guarantee to Zweli Mkhize that he would have the upper hand or gain the upper hand in this race.
I'm reading a tweet by Batabile Dlamini who says something big is coming. Something we all don't expect is about to be done by agents provocateurs. They don't want the conference, but they are doing all in their power to ensure conference becomes a festival of chairs. There is no sober-minded revolutionary that can allow this. Don't know what you want to read into that, Professor Tiff?
Yeah, well, good. I'll get to that, but let me just put a footnote to what Susanne has said, Professor Boysen, by the way, has said, namely that the law of the jungle is uncomplicated. Even the lions know that. If you want to take down a buffalo, be ready and prepared for a good fight. And I'm saying the three combined, Mkhize, Sisulu, and Dlamini Zuma combined, numerically speaking, they cannot bring down the buffalo. Let's just accept that. And then I'm prepared to eat my head, should I be proven otherwise by Sunday. All right. Now, Madam Batabile Dlamini, I have a tendency to take her serious. I do. Because she's one of those who told us, look me in the eye and say, you have got no Smolanyana skeleton in your closet. She might be knowing more than I do about what is likely to happen, because there are murmurs of attempts at collapsing the conference. But I'm not sure if it will reach that stage. Some wrangling will be there, and we are already used to that. But after 3 days, one way or another, either of the two factions, by the way, need the ANC. None of the two factions is prepared to work away, because that is the behemoth out of which they feed off. I dare say, even those who don't want Ramaphosa, but they also want him, lest they lose holus bolus in 2024 if any other person comes in. Because for now, they don't have a credible candidate. As an organization, within the Rakshas factions, there are good men and women, but they are not there. They are not ready to dirty their hands. Perhaps they are repulsed by the stench that comes out of there. But that said, even those in the RET, they know without him, the party would be gone. So it's a paradox. It's a paradox of sort. They want him, they don't want him. They know the benefits of having him, but at the same time, they pretend otherwise. And not everybody is an idiot to the extent that they cannot appreciate that. Hence, I say they will try this and that, but at the end of the day, they will let the process to conclude and yield the appropriate candidate. And I dare say the buffalo will prevail.
Professor Susan, I mean, what about these little other, shall we call them, skirmishes that are playing themselves out as well? Tony Yengeni, the Electoral Committee has written to him saying they regret to inform you that you've been disqualified from being nominated as a candidate for any of the NEC positions during the 55th National Conference due to take place at Nasrec on the 16th to the 20th of December. Carl Niehaus has been expelled from the party. In fact, Yengeni coming to his defense, coming out to support Carl Niehaus today. He was speaking earlier on our sister program, The Full View. Take a listen to what he had to say.
He must go ahead and challenge that expulsion. Because our experience of the ANC up to now has been the targeting and victimization of certain people that are critical of the things that are happening in the ANC. And therefore, I do not doubt in any way the correctness of his decision to challenge that expulsion.
Of course, Tony Yengen speaking about his own disqualification. He took to Twitter a couple of days ago and wrote, "This is going to finish our movement, a movement I served full-time with utmost dedication for the last 46 years of my life. It's painful." Prof. Boyson? Okay, seems to be having a problem with Professor Boyson's line. She, of course, has been load shed. Professor Tefu, are these things we're seeing happening, you know, your Niehaus issues, your Tony Yengen is ineligibility and so on. Do you agree with him that this is the stuff that's going to kill their movement?
This was done fairly early. Certainly, they wouldn't be where they are today. They didn't act as they ought to have acted at the time when the rot began to set in. And it reached a point where, like cancer, it was too close to the bone. These are the right decisions that have been taken. This is what ought to have been. But late as it might be, but I'm one of those who say it is never too late to do the right thing. How far it can take the movement, I don't know. But certainly, it's commendable. It can restore, in the court of public opinion, some respect and respectability. But it's not. It's a bit too late, given what is about to happen in the next few days, even come 2024. But if they continue on this trajectory, they might even surprise themselves in 2024. I sense some resoluteness, some preparedness to take the bull by the horn here and damn the consequences. Yes, I commend them for that. It is the right thing to do. Not so much about the party, but about the country. Because when you send the fear of the Lord to the big guns, smaller men and women like me immediately begin to toe the line and walk in the narrow and the straight.
Well, the Minister of International Relations, Dr. Naledi Pandor, says, well, President Cyril Ramaphosa has the right to take the Phala Phala report on review. She, of course, made the comments on the eve of that debate on the Section 89 panel report scheduled for tomorrow. I mean, I don't know, Prof, what you make of, people like Dr. Pandor now coming out, being bold, going out there and expressing their views. Perhaps before you answer that, let's take a listen to what she had to say earlier today.
I think it's really a matter that President Ramaphosa has to deal with, since he is the person that is the subject of the report, and he's acted in terms of the law and the Constitution by following the steps of taking the report on review. It is his right to do so. Whether we agree or disagree, a person has that right. And I will indicate my reaction in Parliament by voting in the session. One or two colleagues have called, but they don't want the minutiae of the issue. They're more interested in, is South Africa stable? Is there a problem? Should we anticipate that there'll be some kind of conflict emerging which will harm the stability? And I've assured them, even when the temperature appears very high in South Africa, we remain a stable democracy. And that we have the rule of law, which needs to be exercised to its logical conclusion. And so they must allow the processes to continue and not be alarmed, and start calling on their private sector to withdraw investment or beware. I don't think it's that kind of situation. But one or two have called. But generally, I must say a number, when they call, say we are asking. It's not because we want to interfere. We respect the sovereign right of South Africa to resolve its problems, but you're our friend, we'd like to know. So those are the kinds of calls I've had. If a diplomat were to talk to me about that, I'd have a real problem. But when it's a foreign minister, it's okay.
Of course, Professor Boysen, and news just in, the Speaker of the National Assembly has again rejected the ATM's request for a secret ballot tomorrow. Final thoughts from you, Prof. Boysen?
Yes, indeed. First, just on Lady Pandor, and she was one of, I would say, the speakers in a very carefully calibrated Ramaphosa campaign on the eve of Nasrec 2 coming out. Just in the last day, we've seen not just her speaking out, but also Stan Matabata and the Premier of the Limpopo and Zamani Soul, Northern Cape. We see big guns coming out and stating unambiguously their belief in Ramaphosa, and then really taking forward the condemnation and endorsement of action against aberrant ANC members, and disqualifying them from running for positions. So I think this is a very carefully calibrated campaign that we see taking shape here. And yes, it is going to be peaking, I believe, at Nasrec. And there is very little in the Ramaphosa approach to Phala Phala and the decision and the timing of taking it into review and control through the NEC decision on the ANC parliamentary caucus. There's very little of that is happening by chance.
Okay.
I think I see all the signs of a very careful communication campaign.
Professors Boysen, therefore, let me thank both of you for coming on this evening. Really appreciate it. And that's our show for tonight. Do join us again tomorrow evening, same time. Have a good night.